Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and specifically welcome back to my masterclass series where I go above and beyond a regular tank review to give you builds in specific tanks, today the T110E5, that have worked for me to allow me to take my win ratio, my damage higher and higher and higher. This tier 10 American heavy tank is a brutal one to play, of course because of the huge weak point on top. Today I'm going to give you some strategies and at least a theory about just almost forgetting about it and using the tank's advantages as a pressure vehicle. So just how has the T110E5 been performing recently? Well, on the European server in the last 60 days, it's pretty much in the middle of the pack, although towards the upper of the middle of the pack with regards to win ratio. And damage-wise, if we order it by damage, we see that the T110E5 again is right in the middle of the pack. And I think why a lot of people struggle with the T110E5 is it doesn't really just have absolutely flawless armor. As I highlighted, this thing has a horrible weak point on top, where only 240 millimeters will give you a 50-50 chance of being able to go through it. And more often than not, people are going to load gold, and then it's really, really simple to pen. Now, the strengths of the T110E5 are that it's got a fabulous 120mm with great damage per minute. So I'd recommend you do everything that you can to make sure that you're continuously firing at your opponents. This is really high with regards to the damage per minute on a heavy tank, and so if you're not trading aggressively, you're not really trading at all. And I think one of the biggest things to think about when you're playing the T110E5 is they're pretty much going to get your weak point anyway. You're going to lose hit points, so try and make yours go as far as possible. And also try and use as much of your gun depression as you can, because then your weak point becomes a lot better. Go sideways on a ridgeline, and then go and left and right to make it difficult for your opponents to be able to snipe that. And especially when you're inside a fairly nice matchup, you can over-angle the side armor, which as we can see is like a boat on the side, so you can bait people into shooting your side and be able to ricochet them. And this is what a lot of people do wrong with the T110E5. They seem to think, oh, I'm not happy sitting still unless I know that I'm 100% sure that my opponents are going to bounce on me. And that fear is actually what stops players in the T110E5 from doing what's good about the tank. And that is fantastic heat pen of 340, great damage per minute, and pretty good gun handling, including decent accuracy. So how would I recommend you set up your T110E5? Well, with regards to the crew, it's not really too high pressure. This is a heavy tank after all. You don't need concealment. On your commander, you clearly want to have brothers in arms repairs, situational awareness, and recon, and then you are pretty much done. On your gunner, try and get yourself Deadeye, so you can be able to increase the crits that you deal to your opponents. If you can squeeze on designated target, that's great to be able to spot them for slightly longer. Make sure you have repairs, and snapshot can help, but as we saw, it's got pretty darn good dispersion on the turret. However, the dispersion when you're moving isn't so good. So for a driver, I personally like to take preventative maintenance, smooth ride, repairs, and then taking off-road driving on a tank like this. If you can get firefighting and clutch braking, all the better. Controlled impact is an option on this tank, but it's really not all that heavy, weighing 55 tons, and so there's not really too many tanks that you're going to want to ram, and you're not often getting the speed up to really be able to deal any significant damage. Then your loader, it's nice and simple, get all of the perks and repairs. Equipment-wise, I have two builds for my T110E5. One is going to be vents, gun rammer with a firepower slot, and a turbo. This will give me upper tier mobility for a heavy tank and really good damage per minute. This is with standard equipment, and I am packing 3,520 damage per minute in the T110E5. My second build will be dropping the turbo, getting the durability device into the survivability slot, and this will give me the track health and the hit points to be able to engage in close quarters combat on maps where a turbo isn't necessary. Field mods wise, you want to take all-terrain suspension to be able to give yourself a little bit more mobility. You want to take accuracy, you want to take view range. Then, in my opinion, you want to take the reverse speed for the power output tuning. You will lower your turret reverse a little bit, but totally worth it for pulling back over a ridgeline when you're using the tank's 8 degrees of gun depression. And for the final field mod, I would recommend improving your gun handling. But make sure, if you do this, that you probably want to end up taking a premium med kit to soften the blows of some artillery, and because it does increase your chance of your crew getting knocked out, so this will help counteract that. If that's too expensive for your tastes, then maybe not take the final field mod, or even go the other way, but then your gun handling will get poor. And considering I personally think that this tank has good enough gun handling to not use vert stabs to invest in other areas, that would not be good for my gameplay. So for a map like this, Pearl River, I'm going to take a turbo instead of a durability device. And that's because this is quite a large map and you need all the mobility that you can get. On Pearl River, you want to start up in the north, at least in my opinion, control the north, turn it into center position, and then you'll be able to snipe out at all the tanks that usually take far too long to break the stalemate in the west. I feel like that is giving me the highest possible chance of winning the majority of my games. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Notice that with a turbo, even outside of a mobility slot, as I am taking the firepower slot on this tank, that's how much I think the rate of fire is very important. This thing is I don't give a monkey's kind of vehicle. I'm just going to try and take you out as quickly as I can and hope that my hit points and my armor keep me in it. Unfortunately, that Chieftain prototype kind of cut me up a little bit there, but I can totally understand because it's really important that you get out of this horrible location here. Getting stuck in this alleyway can be awful, but it's also very important that you push through. You can see that the Chieftain didn't want to push. The M103 hopefully is now that the Lions fired off their couple of shells and pulling back. You have to take this high ground position. If you have 8 or 10 degrees of gun depression or more, take the high ground, otherwise you are going to suffer. But be careful with the tanks towards your right. And we can immediately see we bounce the T-30. And look at this rate of fire. We want to be really aggressive in this situation. Really aggressive. This thing's got all the gun handling. It's got reasonable accuracy. And look at this damage per minute. It's really important that you're pretty much firing on reload on this vehicle. And you can just lock down the tracks of your opponents like we did against that BZ-58. And we want to take multiple chunks out of this moisten on their way up. Other heavy tanks, such as, I don't know, the 279E, for example, they're packing like, what, 2,500 damage per minute? This vehicle is 10% more than that. And with a 400 alpha damage gun, it's really important that you keep going. Use heat. Obviously, in these kind of situations, you've got to be careful with your weak point on top, and I did not know what that Sharp Future 4 was thinking, but we managed to put one into them. Luckily, we've got the reverse speed from the field mod, and this rate of fire just feels lovely. And the damage just adds up so quickly in this tank, it really does. We're going to let the M103 know that we're going to support them. They're valiantly pushing through the center, and oh, this is where you want to be. Behind a Moistion, although he's actually managing to lose all of their hit points, trying to valiantly go after the M103 there. We don't manage to get anything extra. Have a quick look to the left, a little bit concerned that maybe there'll be something like a 268 or an STRV-103 up there. But now we're just going to start clubbing our way through the rinoceronte. And this is kind of like a battle of the worst damage per minute on any tier 10 heavy against one of the best damage per minutes on any tier 10 heavy. The only vehicles that really get better than this are vehicles like the FE215B when it's taking the 3% added rate of fire. But that makes the reverse speed on that vehicle truly tragic. We're locking down the Rinoceronte's tracks. Always try and use your mobility to be able to flank your opponents in this. And because the BZ-68 full burnt, I wasn't really too worried, considering that their Amarak was most likely damaged. That Lion, who took a couple of cheeky shots at us at the start of the battle, has now made their way towards the center. And just look at the power-to-weight ratio on this tank. It's 17.21. And this is why the turbo is so great on this vehicle, because it really pumps that up to a level where you kind of have more medium tank mobility. But more importantly, you will actually massively benefit from the top speed. And that brings me on to another point. That this is the first masterclass video that I've done where there is experimental equipment in the game. And sure, if you have it, I would recommend using the experimental equipment that improves your mobility and also your turret traversal and your gun handling on this tank, if you can afford it. However, I think that a regular turbo outside the slot is never going to be as good if you have the experimental equipment. You can improve the gun handling as well. And that'll be a way for you to kill two birds with one stone, so to say, because you'll be able to get that top speed limit. You don't really need the raw engine power that you're getting across a regular turbo or a bounty turbo or a bond turbo, but you still get that wonderful top speed limit increase that your great power to weight ratio will be able to use. And I want to be able to go faster than 37 in a tank like this. I want to be able to pump it up to 42 is what you can achieve with a turbo. So this E3 thought they wanted to go around the corner, but now I guess they want to try and go the different way. I let the E100 know that I want to support them in this situation, although I think at the time I probably said that I wanted to help the T110E3. I'm quite surprised that I'm bouncing off the line. I personally thought it had 35mm of side armor, but it looks like it might have 40mm of side armor. And I should have realized that the Lion had the durability device, which upgrades their track health there. And so I was unable to track the Lion. I was thinking track them once, track them twice, and then my team will be able to chomp them down. But that wasn't quite the case there. So we're 5 minutes into this game, we've dealt 5,000 damage and 1,000 assistance. And now you're going to see that the T110E5 can be a little bit fast, it can be a little bit cheeky, be a little bit sneaky, but it's also really not bad as a sniper. This thing has enough armor to be able to bounce at decent distances, and it's always a tank that I feel like taking a few risks here and there. So I'm going to make sure I sit still to allow that E100 to get a shot into the 277, and then I'll follow it up with a shot into the tracks. I've got the better rate of fire than the E100, 750 alpha damage, 150 millimeters, so I can squeeze another one out, and then I don't want to block this E100, but he seems to be trying to shoot into the wall right now, and E3 actually manages to find the shot from down below. Put another one into the Leopard Proto, and suddenly we're up to 7,000 damage dealt in 6 minutes of this battle, and we even squeak a little extra in there as well. But I'm a bit of a tunnel vision noob right now, and that's because while I get hit by the Leopard Prototype, look what's behind me right now. There's a Lion, and I didn't even see it. And while we do get the kill on the Leopard Prototype, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Yes, the Lion is behind me that harassed me at the start of the game, and they harassed me at the end. But that was 9,000 combined in under 6.5 minutes. This thing needs to be played aggressively. This thing needs to use its damage per minute. It's more of a medium tank with that regard. And that's what this vehicle is. It's kind of like a heavy-medium hybrid. It's definitely not slow like a heavy. It's definitely not fast like a medium. But its gun will give any medium tank a run for its money. Next up, we're playing on Muravanka, and I seem to be a little undecided about where I want to go. But I feel like the woods... I've been having a lot more success recently with going west on this map. Wargaming have made massive improvements to Muravanka with all of the different ridge lines at your disposal, especially this position in here or this position over here. Absolutely fantastic opportunities for all manner of heavy tanks, especially those like the T110E5 that do have 8 degrees of gun depression. Accordingly, I'm going to be using the turbo because I want to try and contest early positions. And this is just one of those kind of like dream matchups where you're playing against tier 8s, although the artillery might be a little bit of an issue. We've also got to be a little bit careful with a Kranvang on the enemy team. That could dominate us on a ridgeline, especially if they load heat and go after my cupola. But wow, look, WZ-11114, we hit them on the move, and we immediately see that the IS-3 on the enemy team doesn't want to come and fight us. And it's a good thing too, if the IS-3 had come after us, maybe we would struggle a little bit here. Now, we're a bit of an awkward situation here where I want to get my shots in, but I was actually about to go and raise my gun to hide the shell from the enemy team. I got an LT-432 behind me, a Progetto who's in front of me. The artillery hits me. We use our medkit to get our crew back focused so we can put our DPM out against the LT-432, and we've immediately established dominance of the center. Now, I guess I was fairly fortunate that we managed to get that 1,178 damage ammo rack on the 11114. But I'd probably only lost maybe an extra 500 hit points against that vehicle, again because this tank just has such outrageous damage per minute. And I was blocking him in a position where my team would be able to shoot him in the side, whereas I actually get to use him to evade damage from the enemy team. So I'm thinking in this situation, can I try and use it to go hull down? But all that I'm really doing is just blocking myself, exposing my tracks, and more importantly, exposing that horrible weak point on top of this tank. And so I decided to try and change the angle against my opponents here. I'm no longer going to try and harass that location. If I'd crossed really quickly and I got here, I could have been able to use that position to be able to dominate all of these players. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing across because my team seem to be winning the woods. There might be a Kranvang left around, but most of the enemy team have been pushed back. And I have a lot of guns in the woods that if I provide some vision across on tanks like the 704, that they're going to be able to support me. Even so that it sounds like some of the members of our team are saying they are going to be able to support me with fire against those tanks. And we can see that the Kranvang actually ran away from the woods, meaning that it's nice and free for them to sweep round. But I want to just get into a position where I can start to go hull down. Hull down! With, as I said, with the gun rammer, the vents, and a premium consumable and Brothers in Arms, 3,500 damage per minute. Now remember, in all of the games you see me playing today, these are all with regular equipment. If you wanted to slap some bounty gear or some bond gear on this vehicle, well, you could only guess where the performance would be going. The more that I think about it, the more that I would really like to see what this vehicle would be like with the experimental equipment that improves your speed and your gun handling as well. it really might elevate it into more of a medium tank feel with the gun, while also still maintaining that speed increase that I feel that the T110E5 really needs. If only to be able to keep its weak point moving. One of the things that I've realized with vehicles like this, and even vehicles like the M5Y, is that you have to keep moving to be able to avoid your opponents from catching your weak point. If you make it a static target, your armor will fail. However, if you make it an active, mobile weakness that hopefully your opponents bounce off or just don't hit at a clean angle, then you can start to actually block 3,670 damage. And this is something that people don't appreciate about the T110E5, is this armor, it's not flawless, but if you just make sure that you shoot well and you use what is a very aggressive gun, or at least you can play the tank aggressively to make a very formidable gun, just that, formidable against your opponents, then it doesn't really matter if you have a weak point that will occasionally get hit. The worst thing that I see T110E5 drivers do is not take risks. This is a risky tank. It is not for those of you who like a methodical approach that leaves your opponents with zero chance of being able to engage you. Every single tier 8 that fires gold, or 9 or 10 that fires regular rounds or gold, will have a good chance of being able to go through your vehicle as long as they can see your turret. And let's be honest, if they can see your turret, if you can see them and you're shooting them, then they can see your turret. So you've almost got to just forget about it. You've almost just got to give in and just embrace this outrageous pressure tank on a ridge. The 8 degrees of gun depression feels lovely. The reasonably forgiving armor, especially the boat-shaped side hull, feels awesome. And it will allow you to do some simply staggering things. Now, it's not always going to work out like this. Quite often they're going to find your lower plate. Quite often they're going to find your weak point on top. But what I'm really trying to highlight in this video today is that your confidence and your aggression as a player will be multiplied by the statistics of this vehicle. And that is how we managed to do over 9,000 combined in 5.5 minutes in this game. Absolute, complete stomp of the enemy team with 6 kills to boot as well. And these aren't just exceptional. These aren't very, very rare games. I don't play the T110E5 all that much, but when I do, it just seems to perform. I feel like it's this all-purpose tank that is very underrated in this meta. But again, it's only underrated if you're willing to play it aggressively. So now we're going to be rolling out on Ghost Town, and I have to admit I've made a bit of a mistake already, and that is that I didn't take the durability device. I should really have a durability device on a map like this. We're going to do a quick intuition switch to fire heat there, and that's because heat will always be able to go through the STRV-1030's front, whereas the AP rounds on a 120mm caliber gun like this are going to bounce off its all-round 40mm of side armor. Now, of course, I could have fired AP if I'd managed to be able to hit the side of the tank, but I think heat would have gone in anyway on the side of the vehicle, so why not just fire the heat round to secure the kill against a sneaky Swede that it might have been the last time that we got to see them, and don't want to leave them alive and being all cheeky. So I'm feeling a little bit happy in this game, and I just also incredibly amused this AMX M454 is letting me chew them up. Like, the M454 is probably one of the most brutal counters that you're ever going to have to play against in a tank like this. It's one of your mortal nemesis in a vehicle like this, and frankly, now that the AMX M454 is going to be significantly nerfed in the next patch, it means that the age of the T110E5 might be starting to come back. The 54 has been in a state where it's really the only kind of, should we say, tier 10 all-round heavy that you want to play. You don't want to play an E5, you don't want to really even play a Conqueror outside of certain maps compared to an AMX M454. You definitely don't want to play an M5Y while the 54 is in the game. However, with the 54 being nerfed, this might be a really good time for this video, the T110E5 Masterclass, to go out, because there's going to be more reason than ever to try and rock and roll in this vehicle. So we catch a T30 over the hull of the A Phase 1, and I love playing aggressively in this tank. In this scenario, I don't want to side scrape, I'm just going to put my armor out at 45 degrees, because we've got a bit of rubble in front of us, and that will protect our front drive wheel, so we don't need to worry about that. Kind of bumped my friend there a little bit, which is a little bit awkward, and I end up missing my shot on the A phase 1. But here comes the E100, AP round right through the side, aiming lower than the 60mm of space protection. Remember, when you're shooting the E100, you want to aim low. You can see you can go right through the tracks from the side there, even when it's angled fairly okay. You don't want to try and shoot through that 60mm of space armor, especially if you're firing heat. And this is where the E5 is just tremendous. It just feels like this. I don't care. Let's go fight. I love it. I love it. It's like a heavy medium tank. And there we go. We bounce an E100 off our side armor by the looks of it, locking down their tracks. And now we've got that 3,500 damage per minute to just go at this German heavy tank and just keep grinding them. We don't need gold for this kind of a scenario. Just keep slamming their tracks. And in the first, 3.5 minutes of this battle, we are now up to 5,500 combined. Not too shabby at all. Hopefully we'll come around and catch the Conqueror. I should load an HE shell here, and boom, baby, right through the lower plate. And at this stage, I was thinking, oh, we can keep this going. Just keep grinding, baby. We actually managed to put an AP round there, locking down the tracks of the Gorilla, but we get hit in the side by the 140. And I'm just hoping, please TDs, don't hit me, TDs. Oh, that's a big TD. FE405 misses the shell. Oh man, my mouse is all over the place. I was definitely hyped up in this game. The E5 definitely brings out the best in me. It's one of those kind of just a tank where you can just do everything, go everywhere. And I don't like that play actually in retrospect. I know I was trying to lock down the tracks of the Gorilla because I tracked them earlier. And I'm going to lock down the tracks of the FE405. But spoilers, QuickyBaby, if you don't actually damage the TDs, they're going to do damage to you. Well, at least you think they would do. So we hit the 4005's tracks. The Gorilla bounces off us once again, and I'm going to shoot the T110E5, the FE405's tracks again. Now I'm going to load HE, but I'm going to need to ram him just a little bit to be able to kill him. Now I expose myself to the WTL Panzer IV, but now the FE405 is shootable with 2 shots of HE as long as I don't low roll. But oh no, nightmare, and I low roll on the FE405 for only 422 damage. Shame. But I wanted to highlight just how resilient this tank is. And hopefully, rewind if you didn't see, you'll see that each time I need to block a shell, I turn my armor slightly to the side and I try and go forwards and backwards to bait them. And you'll be so surprised how many people choke on the lower plate of the E5 because of its great upper hull armor. And you'll be very surprised at how many more players choke trying to shoot the side armor on this tank when it is very well angled and will provide some auto ricochets. And while we only managed to grind out whatever it is, 7,500 in this game, oh, you can clearly see I can't count. That's actually 8,400 combined in 5 minutes. I feel like this was a very showing game of what the E5 is all about. Aggression, aggression, aggression. Handle yourself under pressure. Don't stop moving. Don't give them an easy shot. And one of the reasons why I do enjoy using the turbo on this tank is it does give you that extra grunt in the engine to go forwards and backwards and avoid. But still, I still think that a durability device would have been better on this map. Although, we're looking at the final shot being 26 damage, it wouldn't have kept us in against the WT shell. And since I kind of gave up caring in the T110E5, my average damages per game, my win ratio, and even the amount of frags that I get per battle have been better than ever before. And it honestly surprises me that the T110E5 has such a low requirement for a 3 mark. And I think that's because it has some stiff competition. The AMX M454 and the Super Conqueror are clearly better tanks, at least with regards to when you want to have pristine tier 10 only combat. However, I genuinely think that the T110E5 is better than the Super Conqueror when you get good matchmaking. When you're playing against tier 8s, when you're playing against tier 9s, the T110E5 is faster and has way better hull armor. And while you do have that weak point on top, it's really not so much of a big deal against those lower tier tanks. And I think the better hull armor will mean that this thing just loses less hit points when it's caught out and forced to play aggressively, unlike a Super Conqueror. However, the Super Conqueror will do better when it gets to sit on a ridgeline and have those kind of perfect engagements, and also when it has to fight tier 10s, and when you really don't want to have a big weak point on top of your tank, and the battles turn into like that stalemate, which the Super Conqueror does find it easier to grind through. And so all in all, the T110E5, I think this is an underrated heavy tank, and I think that if you're an aggressive player who excels in faster heavies and you're not afraid to go after your opponents and take the fight to them, you will also be able to excel in the T110E5. So give it a go. What have you got to lose? Get stuck in, get to the front, use your mobility to be able to take that central position and relentlessly bully your opponents with your overall superior statistics, while also hopefully forgetting about things like horrible weak points on top of your tank. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for this masterclass on the T110E5. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the T110E5 in the comments down below. Do you think it's an atrocious tank, or do you think it's also an underrated gem? And if you're watching this video as it's released on Friday, I've got fresh new drops on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. So come and get yourself some goodies to spend in the in-game store. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.